So hello, everybody. This is the Self-Worth Talks. I'm Suzanne McCall, and I'm a psychotherapist turned, coach, speaker, talking all about self-worth and everything that kind of is related to that. And in particular, I've been very interested in the topic of leadership and how people kind of navigate that in their own sense of their own self-worth. And I have a special guest today, Lorraine Connell. I'm so happy to have you here.
Thank you so much, Susan.
You're welcome. Lorraine, you are a coach and a leadership mentor, which I love that term, working with teenagers mostly, right? And I don't know if it's with their parents, but I think mostly with the teenagers.
Well, I think it's inevitable that you end up working with the adults and people in the teens' lives because we are so influential in how teens develop.
Yeah, that's true. And I think that some of their teens' ideas about what's okay and what's not okay, it it sometimes comes from the parents. I know I tend to be very talky places and my kids are like, Mom, So they're a little not like me. I think they're not sure. I think kids are not sure these days what is the best way to be and how to be assertive or all sorts of ways, things that are confusing to them about communication.
Yeah. And what's interesting about teens today, and I don't know if it was teens when we were teens, but teens today with social media and constant contact with their phones, I think things that were challenging or outside of the zone of comfort for us, what was a little bit less scary when we were kids, because I don't think there was this immediate response to, oh, you made a mistake. Oh, you did something that might be a little humiliating.
Mhm.
Where now in social media, there's this immediate response, and it just increases the fear around our
Yeah.
teenagers.
Yeah, I think that whole social media comparison is so crazy. Before we go further with talking about everything you're doing, can you tell us a little bit about yourself? I always love to have people hear how people got where they are, like who they are, where they come from and what makes them tick. Maybe you could
Sure.
tell us that.
Yeah. So I started as a high school educator. I taught chemistry, and I also was a facilitator for a leadership program at my school where kids were fortunate enough to earn college or high school elective credits for leadership work. And in my 20 years, closer towards the tail end, about 15 years in, I started realizing that not every kid saw leadership opportunities, and even less kids really saw themselves as leaders. And so as I was navigating this course of student leadership, I was talking to kids and I was like, hey, how come you haven't applied for this leadership program? And they would look at me like I was crazy. I'm not a leader, Miss Connell, or yeah, they call
Yeah.
me Miss Connell. And I would say, what? Why don't you see yourself as a leader? And they, well, I make mistakes, so I'm obviously not a leader.
Ooh.
And I was sort of navigating that perfectionism syndrome that many of us are experiencing
Mhm.
myself. And I realized that as a teacher, I often did not own my mistakes. I did not present mistakes in a way that kids knew I was making mistakes. So I was sending the message that you can't make mistakes.
There's so much unspoken messaging
Yeah.
going on. That's
Yeah. And
wild.
so because I was realizing that for myself, I was seeing it in my students, I started to really do some research and investigate a little bit more into that. And I found that it was really common that most teens would not define themselves as leaders.
Mm.
And I didn't think that that was the world that I wanted to live in. I definitely didn't want to raise my own children to not see themselves as leaders. And so I I took a risk and left my teaching job and started the company Peers Not Fears to really try and challenge those beliefs around leadership, especially for our teens.
Wow. Oh, that's amazing. I think it's so valuable. And like you said, I know like that, you know, when you're as you're talking, I'm thinking about myself too, right? Like when I was young, I didn't think of myself as a leader. I didn't think I had anything to say. I didn't, yeah, I thought I would be, I couldn't, I was afraid to speak in public. So how could I be a leader? You know, there's
Right.
all these myths that people have about what a leader is, which I know that's something you talk about. And I think it's great what you're doing. And can you talk more about that, the myths that about
Yeah.
leadership? Because it's crazy.
It is. And, once I started in investigating these myths, I saw it in myself as a parent. I saw it in myself as a teacher. I saw it in myself as a regular individual. So, one of the main beliefs is that leaders are perfect, or that they don't make mistakes. And as a teacher, I mentioned that, I wouldn't if I came up with a problem in my classroom, I would immediately switch to plan B. I wouldn't acknowledge that I was doing that. I had plan B, C, and D in my head already. And so my students, let's say I came from like a really tough meeting and I had to immediately be on for the students that I was facing. And I had to like put a wall up. And when we do that, we disarm the ability to be human. We disarm
Mhm.
the ability to see the kids seeing us as human. And we are providing this idea that perfect is a normal thing. And I didn't see powerful CEOs, presidents of the United States, like lots of people don't acknowledge when they make mistakes because we believe that if you make a mistake, you are seen as weak, you are seen as bad, you are not doing the job. And supervisors in my position didn't acknowledge their mistakes. And so I was believing that in order to be a teacher in a classroom, I couldn't make mistakes. And so there's this belief all over the place that
Mhm.
mistakes are bad. And
Mhm.
as a parent, if I do something and I realize, oh, that probably wasn't the right thing, like I'll default to ignoring it or not accepting it and not acknowledging those behaviors with my children, teaching them that they can't make mistakes. And so it's everywhere, this belief of that a leader is perfect. And
Mhm.
then one of the other myths is that a leader has a title. So if I'm a student, Joe student in a school, and I'm not a student council president, vice president, treasurer, I'm not a
Head
captain of
coach.
right, I'm not a captain of a sports team, then I'm not a leader. And
Yes.
so I'm in this belief that if there's only a handful of those spots available, and if I'm not one of those spots, then I'm not a leader. And that
Mm.
couldn't be further from the truth because I try and share this example because I think we often lose this in classrooms. When two kids are working together because one kid maybe has a little bit more confidence in the work that they're doing and the other one doesn't, and they're working together, there's a ton of leadership skills that have to be used in that moment. The one has to be able to share their knowledge, the other one has to be able to ask for help. And there's that simple example
Mhm.
is a huge
Mhm.
opportunity for leadership. And that is, you know, it's really, really powerful. And when you know that that's leadership, then more people can see themselves as leaders.
It totally changes your whole perspective.
Yes.
And these are all one of the reasons I think this is so important what you're doing is because, you know, I work with people who are in corporate and management, leadership roles, designated leadership roles, right? And then the people who are not are all, they don't feel like leaders. They don't know how to use their voice in many ways and communicate. And the whole pressure now for companies is for leaders to be more collaborative, more transparent, more um, growth mindset,
Yes.
really stay more human. And it's really hard for them to do that when we've all been raised the way you're talking.
Yeah.
And we have to start younger to start people naturally knowing that they can do this.
Yeah. And as you were talking, the other thing that happens, especially in high schools, is that we don't teach how to delegate, right? So I,
Mm.
as a teacher, maybe I'll give one or two students an opportunity to help me in the classroom, but I'm only going to pick those. I think that was me. I'm only going to pick those students because in the past they support me, they follow through, and if they make a mistake it lands on me, so I've impressed on them that it's really really important that they do a good job. But at some point those individual students are feeling overwhelmed, they're feeling like they have too many things on their plates. You can name those kids in your, your experience, those overachievers, they're doing everything,
Yeah,
so and
yeah,
so they're joining the other club, but sending the message to those students that they're the only ones that can do those things, and we're sending message to every other students that if you're not as good as this kid,
yeah,
you're not eligible for those opportunities. And so
yeah,
we're sending so many mixed messages out there. And you're right, we were never taught, like at this age we were not taught those skills on how to delegate, how to communicate really well, how to collaborate. Like I think of what we do for collaboration in schools is, that group work.
hmm.
And
And there's
we
always
all,
one person that does it all.
yes, and everybody else is like, cool, I can just let so and so do it. And then we get into the workplace and we're really expected to be able to, equally contribute, but we don't know how.
Right, right. And the people who, I mean, you almost are, we're almost creating, kids who feel like they can't say this is too much for me. I think that's partly why there's so much anxiety with teenagers. They can't say this is too much. I can't do all of this. I need help, because that's seen as not something a leader would do, and not, um, it would just kind of take away from their sense of people valuing them.
Yes, yes.
Yeah.
And I also think that like there's not a lot of opportunity for oh shoot, I lost my train of thought. Go
Yeah.
on.
Well, and when I was in college, I'm thinking like when I took some especially when you're in grad school, the professors would say, "Oh, okay, you two are going to teach this module, and you're going to teach." But I used to think, and I'm at fault for this, like, well, why aren't they doing it? Why do I have to do it? But they never explained. These are leadership skills. I want you all to have them. This is a collaboration, because that wasn't where I came from.
No, no, it's definitely skills that are needed to be taught at a younger age so that we can use them as adults in our professional lives.
Yeah, because then you get into these professions and you are afraid to say this, like ask questions, like, I'm not sure, I don't understand this. That means that there's something wrong with you if you don't know everything. I mean, there's so many myths about what it takes to be, a professional, even because
Mm-hmm.
the kids saw those teachers and they never knew that either the teacher didn't admit it and the kids could kind of see it, or
Yes.
it was like we think we were
Yeah.
fooling the kids, right? But we weren't.
Well,
And
and
it's
I
still
think
not
of
healthy.
think of the executives that you're talking about, right? We who are below those executives, we're looking for them to model the
Yeah.
behaviors that are okay. And if, like a teacher, those executives are not acknowledging their missteps, they're not recognizing responsibility because their belief system is that they can't, because then they'll be seen as weaker and not as effective. The rest of the team is following in their example. So nobody's accepting responsibility because they don't know how, and nobody is
Hmm.
accepting, the challenges with mistakes. So how are we supposed to be growth mindseted if
Yeah,
if we're not going to see mistakes as being a valuable tool?
exactly. And I mean, that's where I talk a lot about imposter syndrome, right? people get it because they think that they're not really good at what they're doing because they're not perfect or, whatever. So, what are the skills of leadership that you're, like, what do you do with the kids? How do you teach them about leadership? Do they want to be leaders?
Well, I think if I go back to that comment about being afraid to step out of their comfort zone, if you're not given a title or popular enough to be a leader, then you're afraid to step out of your comfort zone for fear of being ridiculed by your peers or on social media. And I think there is this belief that anything out of my comfort zone is in my panic zone. And what I try to impress upon with the students that I work with is there is this middle zone. There is this like stepping a little bit outside of your comfort zone. I actually used this example with my own teenager recently. My child is in a job and he doesn't really like it. And he's like, I don't know how to get out of this job. And I said, that's a muscle you've never used. So imagine going to the gym for the first time and doing some bench presses. The next day you are sore. The same thing is true. It's really hard. So take a little step. And that's what I'm talking about is like one of the skills that our teens need to see is that there is this big zone in between where we are comfortable and where we are in anxiety. And so I love to talk to kids about what it feels like, because it does feel uncomfortable to be outside of that challenge zone. And I think a lot of us immediately say that discomfort is panic and anxiety. And there's this range that we don't really know about. And again, we're not really giving kids that opportunity at home. As parents, we're trying to fix their mistakes. And in school, we're like, nope, everybody has to get an A on this test. And if you don't, then you're a failure. And so there's like this belief system that we have ingrained into every kid that has gone through the school system that mistakes are not a good thing. And so that is one of the skills that I really try and impress on kids is one, stepping outside of your comfort zone and knowing that you're not immediately going to be in anxiety mode, especially if nobody knows what you're doing. That's the other trick. And then the other thing is to really help kids understand that mistakes are how we learn. And we don't celebrate mistakes really ever anywhere. So that's what I try and challenge them is, and nobody's going to reward you for making a mistake, but when you make that mistake, you've learned something. And if you can start to build that muscle and build that knowledge, then it's going to be a little bit easier for you to take and make mistakes.
Oh my, that's both of those concepts are so important, like the growth mindset and mistakes are opportunities. I know it's really, I believe all that. And, I can see like going in and like you leading a group of kids to learn that. But then what about everybody else and the whole system? I feel like the whole systems have to change, like grading and, everything.
There is.
It's an overhaul.
Yes, it definitely does. It does. But when you are working with a small group of students, we know that the system isn't going to change for them. So it's about, and what you are talking about is self-worth. So we have to start to understand that when I make a mistake, yes, society is going to tell me it's bad. My teachers might tell me it's bad. My parents might tell me it's bad. But I need to be able to develop inside that confidence in knowing that every decision is going to go in one direction or another or multiple directions. And it's not always going to be quote unquote right. And that's the other thing that I try and challenge kids is decisions aren't right and wrong. Decisions are opportunities to practice our skills. And if you believe that they're right and wrong, then you will always be wrong because being right is somebody else's opinion and not yours.
Yeah, I love that idea. And you're teaching, this is such a big thing, like, how we judge our value and our worth based on what other people say. So you're really teaching that independent thinking to really be able to say, well, this is what they say and that's what they say. and really taking time to think about it and look at what their values are and what they believe, and feel good about something they did, even if other people don't appreciate it or understand it. That's so important.
Yeah, and I think there's a lot that can be gained by doing activities and things where it's okay to make mistakes. So when I'm working with a small group, we'll do activities where they're challenging their beliefs, they're challenging their, like, this is how we solve this problem, and then the problem isn't the way they thought, and so they have to problem solve through. When I'm working with individual students where, you know, in my team leadership program that's available online, I will give kids activities to do. And the best part about that is that nobody else really knows they're trying these things. So if they don't succeed by society's parameters, it's okay, because when they come back to my group, they're able to talk about it with a group of other students who tried things. And it's when you're in a classroom setting or a group setting and the person in charge says, let's do this, and you are afraid to do it because you don't know the right answer and you don't know the right method in solving the problem. There's that fear of trying because you don't know what the people around you are thinking, feeling, and believing in how to solve the problem. And I think, unfortunately, we've gotten so far into that system where, you know, I'm not going to step forward until you step forward, and you're not going to step forward until I step forward. So we're all just staying in this same spot because we're afraid of what will happen if we don't succeed.
If we look foolish or if we don't succeed. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I think that's what's so important with what you're doing also, is that having discussion, teaching the kids how to discuss, how to talk about things and listen to each other, because that is such an important skill that, you know, is just not taught. And then, like, when you get into jobs, that it doesn't happen. But when you do that, that's when you start to hear what other people think, and that you're not so different than other people.
Yes,
you know,
exactly.
which is so
Exactly.
helpful.
Yeah, and I think, you know, I think as adults we had growing up this experience of being able to have conversations and being able to understand different perspectives and being able to, you know, okay, that's maybe not my belief, but I can see where you're coming from. And now we're so siloed because of social media. We as adults don't know how to have those conversations anymore. So how are we expecting our youth to be able to do those things when we ourselves lost those abilities?
Yeah. Well, it's really hard too, because you know, we're going into, you know, corporations or companies or jobs where they don't have that kind of infrastructure always, you know, and I know that's the push to have more of that, but that opportunity to discuss things and to hear what your opinion is, and you really have to have it built in, the opportunities to do it, which is why your course does that. But even once you start doing that, then kids start to become more comfortable with it, and they'll just naturally do it.
Yeah, it's building that muscle again, right?
Building that muscle, and the confidence that they're building, and the self-esteem that goes along with that.
So important, so important. And I think the less we do those kind of activities where we're building confidence and having conversations that don't go the way we plan, the stronger those muscles are. And I think of, you know, I think of the skills that I learn by working with these teens. They are teaching me as much as I'm teaching them. And I think that's one of the challenges we as adults struggle with is, you know, understanding that we don't know everything. And I don't know that we think we do, but we sure do act like we do.
Yes, we do. I know, whether it's at work or with our kids or our peers.
Yes.
Yeah. It doesn't feel good, right? To say, I don't understand that, or I don't know. I have no idea what I'm doing, that kind of thing. Yeah. I think that the message of I don't really know what I'm doing, but let's try to work it out. I'm not sure what we're doing here. Let's try to figure it out. What would work best is really something that we have to get used to.
Yeah, and there's so
Yeah.
many strategies that, we can give each other, right? So what I hear you saying is, or yes, what I heard you say, I really like, this is what it makes me think about is we're not having those kind of conversations because we're not really listening. We're thinking about what I'm going to say in response to what you're saying. And I've missed the whole, you know, concept of what you were trying to say to me.
Yeah. Yeah. That's really great to be able to teach the kids. And
Hmm.
what are some of the other, how else do you help them with this? Do you give them assignments or what do you do to help them with
Yeah.
this?
Yeah. I was actually just working on something, an activity for parent and teen combination, right? So thinking about how to engage in a conversation with my parent about the things that are important to me, or let's even talk about mental health, right? We as adults, we want to believe that our kids are safe, they're comfortable, they're, living their best lives, but in reality they're bombarded and impacted by all sorts of things. So if you're
Mhm.
having a conversation about mental health and you're not going to ask the tough questions of your kid because you don't want the answers. There's an activity that I have for kids in order to have these conversations with their parents. And
Wow.
part of the challenge is as a parent, I have to listen and I can't dismiss what they're saying as not reality because it may not be my reality, but whatever they're telling me is their reality, and we operate from like, I don't want that to be true for you, so that I'm sure it's not that bad, I'm sure it's not like you're saying it is, because we don't want to be experiencing that. So I work, I try and give the kids these activities that are going to challenge them, but it's essentially making their relationship stronger with the people that they're impacted with.
Mm.
um, One of the things that I see pretty starkly is kids graduating from high school and going into college. There's all of this support in their lives as high school students. And as soon as maybe they don't go to college, or maybe they're just taking a year off, but all those supports that were in place are gone. And kids don't know how to solve their own problems because we're not giving them the
Mm.
opportunities. So
Yeah.
I put them in places where they're like, okay, I have to sit with somebody else at the lunchroom today. How am I going to do that? Maybe I'm going to ask a friend. And right. So, like, I've figured out a way that I know it's too hard for me, but now I've figured out a way I have solved my problem. Whereas, I'm just not going to do it is the other approach. And so, giving them little things to do where
Mhm.
it challenges them and puts them in uncomfortable situations so that they're building that muscle so that they know that they can do those things.
Yeah. Wow. That's amazing. I realized I didn't ask you what your definition of being a leader is.
That's a great
If our
question.
old definition isn't really accurate, how would you, I mean, you may not have an exact answer to that, but I'm just wondering.
Yeah, and I think for me, and I do talk to the people who come to me, I do tell them what my definition is. My definition is, if you make a decision, you're a leader, because every decision you make has an impact on one person. It definitely has an
Mm.
impact on you. So you're leading yourself in essence in a direction, right? And then hopefully once you see yourself as that leader because you're making decisions, then you can say, oh, and when I make this decision, I'm leading this group of students or this group of people. And so leadership really starts with making a decision. And from
Wow.
my research, we make 30,000 decisions a day.
Oh my
So,
God, that's amazing. 30,000.
yeah,
No wonder
yes,
we're tired by the end of the day.
yes. And often most of them are automatic decisions, but sometimes we have to reflect, like when my alarm goes off in the morning, am I going to get up and get to do the things that I'm plan to do, or am I going to hit snooze and maybe miss out? And like in society, they'll tell us that not getting up is a bad decision because you're missing out. But you are going to learn that every time you press snooze, you are missing out. And if you're being told you're missing out, then it doesn't matter. But if you realize, hey, I didn't get my workout in this morning because I pressed snooze so many times, or I slept through that first class that I was supposed to be at. Now I don't have a ride to school. What am I going to do? We're learning from those decisions, whether they're good
Yeah.
or bad.
Yeah. I mean, it's just bringing awareness into the fact that we are all making those decisions, but you're not even focusing on it or knowing that there's a consequence, and intentionally, you're helping kids intentionally make decisions
Yes.
based on
Yes.
where they want their life to go.
Or what information they have in front of them
In the
at the
moment.
time.
Yeah. 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 And I think these are the leadership skills that we all need as adults in
Yes.
everywhere we go. Yeah.
Yeah. When I left the classroom, I was like, I'm going to work on leadership skills. And I realized pretty quickly that I myself had leadership skills to work on. And then I realized, gosh, everybody everywhere should be working on leadership skills. And I was like, who am I going to focus on? And it took me a while, but I did decide that I wanted to be in the teenage age group because that is where I find the most joy and I know that I can have the biggest impact with. But like you said, we all need to be working on leadership skills. And I often will say to the students that I'm working with, even if you are the best leader, you still have room to grow because every leader needs to be working on leadership skills.
Wow. I love that. That's an amazing takeaway that we're all leaders.
Yeah.
We all have to keep working on it. And, that's each one of our responsibilities, actually, like to be really present and part of society and the world. There's so many opportunities. Yeah.
Yes.
Now you have classes. I know, we're talking about doing something, but what is it how can people find you, or what are your offerings that you have for people?
Yeah, so my website is peers-not-fears, and most of my social links are the same, Peers Not Fears. LinkedIn, I'm Lorraine Connell. But I do, like you said, I do have an offering that is available. I do a free 30-minute Zoom once a month, and anybody who is a teenager, a parent with a teen, or working with teens, or anybody who's really interested in learning about leadership skills is able to come to that. But that's like feeding people into what I call the teen leadership roadmap, and that is monthly activities, monthly check-ins, building those skills that maybe we're not learning so much in high school. Like, I've often heard kids say, can you teach me how to do my taxes? Or how do I do an interview for the job or college? How do I write a resume? And so I'm hoping to bring in different experts to have conversations with the kids every month that it has a different focus, especially on things that they want. But like you said, the biggest benefit of that is being among other teens who are working on these challenges and listening and learning from each other.
Yeah. That's so important because they learn from each other even more than
So
us.
much.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, thank you. We'll put all that in the show notes, and
Awesome.
I really look forward to hearing more about what you're doing, watching it. I'm going to come to your next Zoom session. I'm really excited, and take care, and I hope you have a good afternoon, a good day.
Thanks, Suzanne.
Thank you so much. Bye, everybody. See you next time.